our virtual Scottish Summit session. Tragic that we can't all be together, but at least we've been able to get it together virtually. My name is Martin Doyle, and this presentation is around customer insights or insults. So interesting, this background to this first slide, because that's me last year in the audience at the Scottish Summit thinking, wow, what a great event. And this year we are sponsoring. So delighted to be involved in the event. So I'd like to also thank our other sponsors, Script Runner, Proximo, Redspire, Agilicis, and of course Hitachi. So on to the presentation. As I said, my name is Martin Doyle. I'm the founder and CEO here at DQ Global. That's a QR code to my LinkedIn ID, and there's a LinkedIn connection there. Love to connect with to anybody and everybody that's on the call. Okay, so a little bit about us, because it's not really about us today, but we are a technology company who empower organizations and people to achieve more with their customer data. We're here to help organizations who are frustrated, confused, and generally fed up and overwhelmed with the task of dealing with their low quality data. We help them make their customer data fit for use and ensure business decisions are made from data they can trust, and trust being really the operative word here, because that's what it's all about. So here's what we're going to be talking about today. This session is about avoiding insulting our audience, making sure that our data is fit for use, and trying to derive the critical insights which help our businesses succeed. So our agenda. What are insights? What are insults? The journey from data to insights or potentially insults. Some real world stories for you about things that have really happened from an insulting, insightful perspective. Where does this all fit in the Power Platform? And what can you do to obtain insights and avoid those insults which offend our clients? So here we go. Here's a quick picture, thanks to Andrew Welsh with the support of Lee Baker, who is involved in the community, who produced this great image of the Power Platform as a flow, if you like, a sequence of events. And we'll be talking about this in the context of data collection, how we deal with data sources and ingestion, the storage of that data, the analysis of it, and of course, the visualization of it. And we will see how the data flowing through the system is the fuel that supports either these insults or insights. Well, data's everywhere, as we all know. Everything's data-led, data-driven, data first. We've heard the government talking about making decisions around COVID. Everything is around the data. The data drives the decisions. And I've heard today's keynote speaker, actually, I've been on other events where James Phillips has said that Microsoft are a data-led business. So data is pervasive, it's everywhere. We can't get away with it, it's getting bigger, we all know about it. And there's all kinds of data. There's product data, customer data, file storage, you know the deal. So why are we doing this? Why this data to insight initiative? Because we realize in a business, there are really no data initiatives, there are only business initiatives. And why does a business want insight? Well, the business wants more revenue, less waste, and you want to mitigate risk. You want to avoid damaging the business. Our specific interest and specific focus today is around name and address, typically customer data, and how from that you can drive the insights and deliver the value that your customers are looking for. I remember Zig Ziglar, I don't know if anybody have ever heard him speak, a really evangelistic guy, saying that if he gives his customers enough of what they want, he would surely get enough of what he wants. And I think that's a good lesson for all of us, that we should think about what our customers want, give them what they want. And another good bit of advice I was given once was, if you wish to get into someone else's shoes, you better take your own off first. And I think that's very important when we're trying to derive insights. So insights, some thoughts. Well, insights are certainly not data. Data takes many forms, but remember, it's just that, it's just data. It's not logical and it's certainly not obvious. People behave in some very, very unexpected ways, as we all know. Another thing that I picked up this morning, actually, from James Phillips, he mentioned that Satya Nadella says the decision is path dependent. Now, I'm not sure whether I misheard that from path. I thought past, and that made me think, I wonder if it's also past dependent. So I think the decisions are both path, where you're going, and past, where you've come from, dependent, because they are very much context led. They're not simple, they're difficult, and I think that they are really verbs really that allow us to, or they allow us to create a verb which causes us to take actions and drive future activity. They require a lot of effort to uncover. They're not simply about simple things. They're about observing human behavior, which are obscure, less apparent, intangible, latent, and they need to cause us to re-examine things, because we have to absorb and interpret this data. Often we're looking in a rear view mirror approach to derive that. Many of you might know of that apocryphal story about the beer and diapers, or nappies story, where analysis was done on data and they found this weird correlation between nappies being bought and beer being bought on a Friday night. And it turned out that the fathers who were sent to the corner store on the way home were actually seeing that beer and nappies were being bought. They put them next to each other at the checkout, and lo and behold, they sold a lot more of it. So great observation, good insight. With masses of data at hand, it's very difficult, very, very difficult now with the volumes of data that we're dealing with. So I think it's important that you look at these things holistically. We've got to analyze intently. So I caution us all about becoming attached to that sort of singular, inspiring data point that we think derives this magic conclusion. And think holistically, analyze intensively. There is a story, actually, it's not a story, it's a real case where there was analysis done on health matters. Don't really have time to go into it today, but it's driven the world's decision to drive out fats out of our diets, reduce the what would be seen as a sugar intake, but people are putting supplements in, and it's really affecting the world health by a very bad decision that was made many years ago, based upon 7 countries rather than the world. And one of those countries was actually, believe it or not, in a fasting period. So all the decisions around diet that were made many years ago have now driven this in the world. I didn't put a case study in, but throwing it in now because it's an interesting problem. Okay, insults. What are they? Well, I think they're fairly obvious to all of us. We all know when we're being insulted. So they're offensive. They breach our trust. They certainly damage our relationships, be those between individuals, between companies. And your brand is, if damaged, has a huge impact on how people will think of us, deal with us, and transact with us. Okay, so let's look at the data to insight and think of it maybe as a manufacturing process rather than anything else. So we have this raw ingredient of data on the left, and it's coming in. And if we do that, we've got to inspect that at this early point in the system. Data gets turned into information. Information gets turned into knowledge. Normally we talk about wisdom, but let's use insight as a potential substitute for wisdom. And I'm sure that there are arguments that we could have about whether insight comes before wisdom, after wisdom, etc. But let's just accept that we're trying to get insight today. So it comes in. We need to ensure that it's correct. If we're going to process it, we need to ensure it's correct. Before we turn it into knowledge, we need to ensure it's correct. Before we derive insight, it needs to be correct. Think of it as ingredients. It's food. It needs to be of high quality. It's something we're manufacturing, the materials we're producing things from. It's important, and we'll talk about that a bit later on. So got to ensure that we inspect, got to ensure that we fix if we have a problem. And I think it's important that we all understand that data turning into that insight becomes more and more valuable as it moves through the process. So something I think we should all kind of heed is that in this data to insight process, we should fix things at the lowest stage possible, i.e. back at the data collection in an ideal world. Okay, so we all know the adage, garbage in, garbage out. I think the risk is now it's fast garbage in, fast garbage out, or perhaps we could say fast data in, poor insights out, because never before has it been possible to capture data quickly. Low code, no code, citizen developers, we give them tools to help with the development. We commoditize the infrastructure, which is fantastic. We have Azure. We have on-demand processing, scale up, scale out, amazing. Automated processing of application deployment, DevOps, amazing, because we're automating processes. But what about the ingredients? Rubbish in, rubbish out. Fast rubbish in, fast rubbish out. Fast data in, poor insights out. So all begins with the data. Good old Dr. Edwards Deming, in God we trust, all others must bring data. I think that's just, it says it all, and it was a long, long time ago. He is the forefather of quality. And why do we do that? Because we need trust. Ultimately, we want to trust the data, trust the information, trust the insights. Because as you can see here, trust is like a crumpled piece of paper. You can iron it, you can try and stretch it out, but it's once damaged, it's rarely, if ever, perfect again. So why is customer data difficult to manage? Well, we know from that ecosystem, you can see all the places where data is coming in and out, and we'll talk a bit about that later on. It's very easily stored at low cost, as we know. It can be in Excel spreadsheets everywhere. That causes it to be siloed and duplicated. It can be modified easily by anybody everywhere, and there's very little control over that. It can be misrepresented. We can have dates in text fields. We can have all kinds of data misrepresentations, no rules around data capture. And if there are rules, people will overcome them. They'll put a full stop in a field to save them putting a value in. Drop-down list, they'll end up putting the first value in the drop-down list. There was a great story about an insurance company that the actuaries decided that there were an awful lot of reports of fractured left arms. So they didn't insure fractured left arms anymore. But when they really digged into the problem, then they found that the drop-down list, of course, L came before R, therefore left arm was the default value. And lo and behold, they were not insuring something just because the operators weren't putting the data in correctly. Data has no value until it's used. It doesn't mature. In fact, it ages and decays. We wrote an article about the half-life of data some time ago because of its rate of decay. And in name and address, customer data, it's as much as 20% per year. So it's decaying fast. And it has to be interpreted and used to be useful. Now, you can certainly have data, but you can't have insight without data. Think of the problems that we have around low quality data, even if it's a TV signal. If you have a bad quality data coming in the TV signal, you get a bad picture. If the phone signal's bad, you get a bad conversation. You get frustration and there are consequences and people are misheard and there's confusion. And data's no different. Bad ingredient, bad result. So thought this might be useful, a pilot's view of data to insight. So you're sat in your cockpit, you're flying along, you look down at your instruments and it flashes up 10,000. So we're going to move through the data to information, knowledge, insight, wisdom, etc. And data, 10,000. Now, data is just data. We don't know whether it's feet, meters, inches, or is it above sea level? Information, 10,000 feet above sea level. Interesting. Knowledge, mountains, 12,000 feet above sea level. Okay, take action. Wisdom, climbing to 15,000 feet. Now we come to wisdom. Without climbing, getting over the 15,000 feet barrier above sea level, I may have died. So, little example taking us through that. DIKW and then into insight scenario. Hopefully that's helpful. So where does this come in the normal DIKW? I've changed the wisdom to insight here. But what we say is, if there's a broken data foundation, then when we build this broken foundation, then everything that is layered up on top of that, the app data that's going on the Dataverse, the CRM and ERP data that's going on the Dataverse, the Power BI that's going on the database, the customer insight that are going on the database, and ultimately the actions that we take are distorted. So our leaning tower of data, like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, shows us the distortion from reality and how we make, bad decisions potentially with a high level of certainty because of this distortion from the truth. So hopefully illustrates the point to us all. Okay, some real world examples of insults or insights that have occurred. So let's demonstrate a few here. I'm sure you got a few of your own. I'd love to hear them at any time. So skewed data, bad insights. One man in a database had been pregnant 3 times. One woman had 97 children. I think that the insights that you might derive from that could be a little skewed. Hundreds of customers with the same social security number, and also we have issues in the UK where we have the same national insurance number duplicated because stupidly somebody reused the NI numbers when people they thought had died. So we have a duplicate problem in our unique identification service. Babes and children with mortgages. Interesting. Don't know how that happened. Could have been some validation error. But I think the insights to market to babes and children and offer them mortgages would be not the wisest. How about 30,000 people born on the 1st of the 1st, 00? Like we said before, humans will get round in all kinds of ways this problem, or perhaps that data was migrated into the system and somebody put a default value, like migrating people into CE and putting default user when everybody migrates from on-premise to online, which we've also witnessed. Some customers, incredibly, were born in the future. So here's a good one. When putting this presentation together last weekend, at the beginning of this, a call came into my wife. So it went like this. It said, "Hello, Mrs. Doyle. We're calling you about your accident." Now we've all had these calls, I think, that people are kind of ring in, the ambulance chasing. You've had an accident in your car. We can make a claim. So, Mrs. Doyle, you can claim against the third party and claim damages. She went, interesting. Thank you. But if I can claim against the tree that fell on my car, I'd be very impressed. Now, kind of amusing, and they actually did have a smile, but that insight was completely wrong, wasn't it? They had information that there had been a crash, but they had no insight into whether any third party was involved, and therefore they wasted their time, insulted us in a couple of ways. First of all, they were calling on a landline that had TPS on it. They called on a personal mobile without permission. They wasted our time, their time, and damaged the brand. So hopefully that's a great illustration. And another thing that was interesting is that in a quick bit of research, we used to tell 4 to 7 people when we were disgruntled about something. That's actually now jumped between 9 and 15. And actually 13% of those people that were questioned told more than 20 people. So the problem is that we've got the internet, we've got social media, your digital footprint stays with you forever, and false news and propaganda somehow is believed without question these days. So we've moved to insult at scale, I guess, false information, false news at scale. Here was an interesting one. This was a friend of mine told me this story because they were actually involved in this this example. So where was the insight? The insight was that this was an offer for funeral insurance. So wisely they said, okay, let's look at people who take out insurance. Who are the most likely people to buy? Okay, those people greater than 67 years of age. They did a direct mailing to hundreds of thousands of people. It was a big audience, direct mail piece some years back. The message was, don't let your family pay for your funeral. Okay, pretty innocuous. Had an amazing response. Best DM response rate ever. Also, best number or worst number, however you want to put it, highest number, let's call it, of complaints ever. So the CEO is getting complaints about this campaign, although they had the best response in selling insurance that they'd ever had. The insult was that people were going, oh, what do you know that I don't know? I'm 67 or over. Am I dying? So it really backfired on them in one way. So what was the new insight? The new insight was if they hadn't used direct mail and used TV ads, it wouldn't have been personal. You've looked on the TV and said, that's not for me, or I'm not dying. It still would have driven activity. But because it came in a direct mail piece, they thought, what do they know that I don't know? And it was an interesting set of new insights, if you like. Okay, here's another interesting one. So in the US, this was about what the dad didn't know, but the data told the marketing insights, if you like. So they built a model to predict which shoppers were pregnant by what they were buying at this particular store. Now, the message was around coupons delivered for discounted baby clothes and cribs, US based. The response was that an angry father whose daughter was a high school student received these coupons and thought, what on earth is going on? He angrily rang the organization, told them that he was really disappointed, that their data was clearly wrong. He was a man. How could this possibly happen? The insult was therefore an invasion of privacy and embarrassment on what they thought was their part. But it turned out that actually the insight was that, or the reality was that his daughter, a school student, actually was pregnant and was buying things that were coming into the household. So be very careful about how we use our insights. The insight was correct. The use of that insight, perhaps at an outlier, was incorrect. Okay, I think that moves us on to the piece around how this all fits in the Power Platform and how do we get better insights based upon better data, this raw ingredient that we need to use. So a quick recap on the slide we saw earlier around data collection, the sources, the ingestion, the storage, and the analysis. And I'd recommend going to the link that's shown in the slide there, which gives a great overview of the Power Platform, the data platform kind of architecture. So let's take these one by one. The data collection piece. So we can see it's Power Apps, Virtual Agents, Power Automate. This for me is around data capture, often human entry. So these kind of things require PCF controls, reference data, address verification, record enrichment. It requires process control and it requires rules because all of this data is ultimately going to get into the Dataverse. And it's going to be propagated or shared around multiple applications if we're not careful and cause big problems. And here I think we need to think about that 110-100 principle, whereas if we can fix it at point of capture, where prevention is better than cure, it's going to cost us, let's say, £1. And in other places downstream, it's going to cost us £10 or £100. So it's better to prevent rather than cure. Same deal here. This I think of as data in flight. So this is normally about machines putting stuff in or integration between systems. You're migrating or streaming data in a structured or unstructured forms. So here it requires business rules, validation, data transformations, formatting, again, reference data to ensure that the data is going to be fit for use when it gets there. So again, prevention, so at the low cost end of the spectrum. During the ingestion, We're in flight now. We're in that data factory or event grid. We're monitoring events that are going on. Every time an event changes, we should be monitoring, looking at the business rules, validating, transforming, formatting again to ensure that any data that's changed in the Dataverse at any time is maintained and monitored. So now we're at data at rest. Now we're at the cure end of the spectrum, which is you could think of as the £10 piece or the £100 piece, depending on the amount of effort involved. But if we have this data in the Dataverse and it gets used for insight, visualization, etc., and that's wrong, that's certainly going to be at the £100 end of the spectrum, where we could have dealt with that at the £1 end of the spectrum. So in this case, we're talking about deduplication, of course, again, verification, suppression of deceased and gone away, enriching, enhancing, monitoring, and importantly, mastering of the data so that we can get to the golden truth about the data in our enterprise. And then finally, well, not quite finally, the analysis phase. So we're trying to do some analysis here. This is where customer insights comes into play. This is where obviously the the Databricks, stream analysis, etc., come into play. But you won't get insight if you have duplicates in your customer insights environment. You won't have insights if you have insufficient data, if people are deceased, if people are gone away, if you don't have the correct transactional data associated. So we have two records that are duplicates of each other. Each of them have transactions. Unless you blend those together, you're not going to know who's your best customer, who's your worst customer, what regions are best, etc. Therefore, the insights that we derive will be wrong, and bad decisions will be made with a high level of certainty, which can be, as we talked about earlier, very damaging indeed. So it requires data that is fit for use in this world. And visualization, same story, bad data, bad production process, bad visualization, bad insight. So we're coming up to the 30-minute mark. We'd allowed for 45, but I think we all will enjoy a little break, hopefully. So to summarize, back to our overview of the Power Platform and the aspects around that platform. And we talked about data at source, so fixing it before it gets into the Dataverse, fixing it as it comes into the system. In flight, so that we're fixing the data as it's migrating from that point of capture into our Dataverse through our biz apps or whatever means that data is coming into the environment. And at rest when it is in the Dataverse, so that the business applications that are using it, the visualization, the analytics, all of it is based upon data which can be trusted. So data is definitely our differentiator. With better data, better insight, we have a better business. We shouldn't let our legacy data quality be our data quality future. We can't change the beginning, but you can create a new one. And when you know better, you can do better. And as Jim Rohn says, if you really want to do something, you'll find a way. If you don't, you'll find an excuse. So let's not have any excuses. Let's ensure that our data is fit for use and allow us all to do better business, improve the relationships with our customers, give them what we want so that we surely get what we want, and enjoy all the relationships and business we have together. So that's it in conclusion from me. Be delighted to hear from anybody. Anybody wants to hear about how we might be able to solve these problems that we've been talking about today, we'd be delighted to hear from you. We have another session at 4 o'clock today where we'll be previewing how our products resolve the problems that we've been talking about today. And we look forward to talking to you then. And have a great day. And we look forward to seeing you in person somewhere in the very near future. Stay safe. Thank you.